survival horror, a genre that has seen a recent resurgence of games like Dead Space Remake, Alan Wake 2, and Silent Hill 2 Remake. However, even with the ever-growing popularity of the genre, the actual definition has been lost to most modern-day gamers. So naturally, you might ask, what is survival horror? Well, what better way to understand the definition than to go all the way back to its inception? Back in the 1990s, video game director Shinji Mikami was tasked with remaking a Capcom horror game named Sweet Home, an RPG that saw you trying to navigate an intricate mansion filled with supernatural terrors. The game prioritized exploration and puzzle solving and placed heavy emphasis on item management as well as your survival. It's no wonder Capcom wanted to remake this game since it received critical praise and could have very well benefited from the PS1's then groundbreaking technology. However, after Capcom lost the rights to the Sweet Home license, they took what they had already worked on and decided to reinvent it into something else, adopting many of Sweet Home's gameplay attributes. This project would eventually turn into the game that we know today, Biohazard. Here in the West, however, a punk band had already claimed that name and it would be next to impossible to register the name in the US, so after a company vote, the game in southern parts of the world would go on to be named
Resident Evil.
After 3 years of development, on March 22nd, 1996, Resident Evil hit store shelves for owners of the PlayStation console. This game's unique design and mechanics were going to create an entirely new video game genre, survival horror. Not only was it unique and unlike anything anyone had ever experienced before, but it was also highly enjoyable and were going to inspire too many video games to count. And we're going to find out why. Before we delve into the very original Resident Evil, just know that the footage you're seeing is of the PS5 RE1 Director's Cut port that has the same features but keeps the original soundtrack. Thank God. Also, if you're new here and you like what you're seeing, consider subscribing, that would be super helpful. With that said, let's talk about the very original
Resident Evil.
Now, I think we can all agree that what any horror game needs to fully thrive is atmosphere, and more often than not, that is expressed through convincing visuals, and RE1 certainly delivers. You might see the footage and be unimpressed, but guys, this game came out in 1996 for the PS1. Back then, I think the main challenge was creating human models that somehow didn't look hideous with such limited graphical capabilities and memory. Resident Evil looks amazing for its time, and mostly due to the use of pre-rendered backgrounds. This was a very common practice back in the day where the devs basically used pre-rendered images as the backgrounds of each level and/or environments, instead of the more traditional 3D areas. This may come off as lazy, but what it actually does is give the backdrops of the game way more polish and detail while also saving on memory, so the actual 3D models such as the characters can look way better. RE1 does this perfectly, and playing it upscaled on the PS5 makes the game look even more impressive. This game, much like the one that inspired it, takes place inside of a large spooky mansion, and I absolutely adore this setting. We see spooky mansions used a lot for paranormal, ghost-like tales, so seeing this type of setting be filled with grounded, biologically mutated monsters gives this game a very unique identity, and a lot of these rooms, especially in the residence area, has this grimy, abandoned feel to them. The only thing I wish the Spencer Mansion had more of was detail, but since this experience was the first of its kind, I can let a small nitpick like that slide. Also, this game features fixed camera angles, which a lot of people assumed was a creative choice when in reality, was actually a workaround since Mikami wanted Resident Evil to be in first person. A lot of newcomers are typically turned off by this camera choice, but I for one absolutely adore it. It's very cinematic and leads to a lot of intense situations where nearby approaching threats are completely out of your view. This sounds annoying, but trust me, it's not. Goddamn scary is what it is. This game just never misses and the soundtrack is one of them. Okay, maybe if you're playing the director's cut, you'll be in for some interesting tunes. But for the most part, the soundtrack is downright exceptional for a hauntingly atmospheric but also very catchy collection of tracks that just adds to this game's stellar presentation. The funny thing about RE1 is even the most abysmal part about it is unironically one of my favorite things about the whole experience. I won't even say anything, I'll just let the voice acting speak for itself.
What is this?
Wow, what a mansion!
Oh, Jill, this house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
Captain Wesker, where's Chris?
Stop it! Don't open that door!
Jill, so you're safe.
That's what I was going to say. Where on earth have you been? Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
How about going down to check by yourself? I have a rope here.
Oh, do you? Well, then I'll try to go down using the rope.
Whoa! This hall is dangerous. Maybe it's better to secure our escape route first. There must be a back door somewhere. Let's try to find it first, shall we?
So legend has it that Capcom just put aside any English speakers in Japan and have them do all the English voice acting, with some of these people not even being experienced voice actors, leading to some of the most bizarre, hilarious performances in video game history. RE1 will go on to have the crowning achievement of featuring the worst voice acting present in any video game, and I mean, are you surprised? Now that we've gotten RE1's immaculate presentation out of the way, the biggest and most important aspect of any game is its gameplay. So what about Resident Evil makes it so different? Well, as you've probably gathered from the earlier synopsis, this game has you stranded in a luxurious, abandoned mansion with a complex maze-like layout. Your goal is to escape said mansion, and you do so by exploring your surroundings and being wary of the numerous threats that wait around every corner. You should be fine as long as you have weapons, right? Well, you see, that's the tricky part. There is a very scarce supply of ammunition, as well as other vulnerable resources like health, so you're forced to pick your fights carefully and try to avoid most encounters if possible. Otherwise, you'll find yourself completely defenseless and vulnerable. Power that on with only a select number of inventory slots that will require you to strategically manage what items you carry, and you have yourself a survival horror game. Now that we've found the definition of what makes survival horror by just looking at the great gameplay loop of its creator, is RE1 a fun game to play? What do you think? Resident Evil has some of the best game design I've ever seen in anything ever. The amount of satisfaction and reward you feel when you discover a new area, solve a tricky puzzle, or find a room of valuable supplies cannot be overstated in a game like this, and with Resident Evil, I always want to keep playing to see how well I can optimize my current predicament and survive. On the other side of this, there's no other game that gives you the same kind of dread that RE does. This game does not hold your hand, so if you make foolish decisions or waste the limited tools for survival the game gives you, that's it. It's game over. All of the puzzles have this nice balance of difficulty where they're not ridiculously easy, but they're also not complete brain scratchers, making them really fun to do while also not breaking the pace of the gameplay. The limited ammunition might sound unappealing to modern gamers who are used to the Dooms and Call of Duties where the sole objective is to literally shoot everything, but this aspect is what makes RE not only revolutionary, but just so appealing. It of course didn't invent optional encounters and combat, but mixed out the other survival horror mechanics, and there was just nothing like this at the time. But by all means, if you want to shoot something, you can refer to this game's great arsenal of weapons. You start out with a Beretta, which isn't much, just your average handgun best used on common, weaker threats. But the other three are far more effective and are also missable. The second is the shotgun. That comes really in handy and can not only obliterate common enemies, but can help in almost any situation with its destructive shells. The third is the bazooka, which is unique since it supports 3 types of ammo: grenade rounds, acid rounds, and flame rounds. Grenade rounds give enemies that good old Michael Bay treatment, and flame and acid rounds don't have as powerful of an impact but leave a useful after damage effect. The final available weapon is the Magnum, which is basically just die the weapon. It one-shots all regular enemies in the game and is highly effective in boss fights. The trade-off is its very limited ammo, as well as the fact it can be easily missed. While this arsenal is comparatively very small to the ones featured in later games, I for one love how versatile it is and how each weapon serves a particular function. Oh, and we can't be this far in a Resident Evil review without mentioning tank controls. If you're unfamiliar with tank controls, they're hard to explain, but in short, it's a control scheme that severely restricts your movement and can be hard to get used to. At least to a newcomer, but as your proud RE veteran, I can say that tank controls are not an issue at all once you get used to them. Sure, they're weird at first, but once mastered, you won't even notice them. There's a popular myth going around that Shinji Mikami went with tank controls since the movement restrictions would make the game scarier, but this is funnily enough not the case. The tank controls, like the fixed camera angles, were a workaround due to limitations and not an artistic decision. Welp, it was a fun theory, I guess. Another thing worth talking about is this game's haunting enemy variety, the first of which are these creatures. You've been seeing them in the footage of this video, but in case there was any confusion, this game mainly features the undead as your primary threat. Zombies are scattered all over the mansion, and man are they eerie. From their low, mindless groans and gruesome, well-designed models, this game takes heavy inspiration from Romero's work and makes the undead unsettling. But they're not that way through appearance alone. These guys are numerous and will take valuable ammunition to put down. If they grab hold of you, their bites are pricey when still a lot of your health, so you by all means do not want these creeps touching you. Then there's the second big threat: canines. Zombie dogs that, unlike the human zombies, can nearly match your speed and are fast, ferocious little mutts that will put you out of commission real quick. Their trade-off is their low HP, but they're not even worth facing if you ask me. Then there are giant spiders, which, definitely clashes well with my arachnophobia. These arachnids are fast, will spit acid at you, and take a lot of punishment. There's not a whole lot of them in the game, thank god, so they're best to be avoided. After that are one of Resident Evil's most iconic creatures, the Hunters. Reptilian, biologically engineered monsters that will fuck you up with their heightened senses, fast speed, and quick attacks. There is no shame in dying to these monsters, they fucked me up a good bit on this run you're seeing. Some say the designs are a little goofy, and while I can see it, I kind of like how inhuman they look, and their efficiency more than makes up for their somewhat cheesy appearance. The final notable enemy type are the Chimeras, which make a minor appearance but are definitely unsettling of how they move and can prove to be an unsuspecting challenge. I really dig their insect-like design, and their ability to climb walls can make them really hard to hit. Yeah, this game features a unique roster of enemies that vary in threat level, design, and abilities which will constantly keep you wary and alert. What will really eat through your resources are the multitude of nightmarish bosses within Resident Evil that at some point you'll have to face. The first is Yawn, a giant snake that receives some good build-up before you first encounter it in the attic. This first encounter receives just GTFOing as fast as you can, but when you meet it for the second and final time, it's do or die. The fight is really simple, but props to Capcom for programming a giant snake into a 1996 PS1 game because that couldn't have been easy. The second big encounter is Plant 42, a giant man-eating plant that's basically the main antagonist of the Residence area. It's a very simple fight, but what makes it so cool is the V-Jolt. You see, upon entering the Residence, you have the option of finding and unlocking a room that has a bunch of chemicals. If you're playing as Jill or have Rebecca come help you as Chris, you can create the V-Jolt, a chemical compound that can severely weaken Plant 42 once exposed to its roots down in the basement. Then when you enter the boss fight, it is way easier to kill. I just love optional things like these that reward players for their observations and discoveries. Then there's Black Tiger, which is basically a normal spider but bigger with a lot more health. It's a breeze and can very easily be skipped by destroying the webbing at the end of the room ASAP. The final boss, that being the Tyrant, is a little anticlimactic. In his first phase, he goes down with just a love tap, and in the second one, which is only available in certain endings, it's a little more of a challenge, but still too easy for a game that up to that point had been really challenging. But to be fair, it really depends on how much ammunition you save to that point. That does it for the bosses, and they're a really nice addition that shakes up the main gameplay loop. They're climatic, threatening, and give you a huge incentive to collect and save on high-powered ammunition like the bazooka and magnum ammo. To conclude my thoughts on the general gameplay, one thing I have to gush over is just how much replayability this game has, as well as the entire rest of the series. You see, after beating RE1, you're rewarded with a time that tells you how fast you beat the game. This time can be beaten on repeat playthroughs, and you'll see just how addicting it is to replay this game over and over to get new times. This series is what actually got me somewhat interested in speedrunning due to this one feature. Certain time completions will reward you with unlockable items like new costumes and of course the one and only infinite rocket launcher, a special weapon that will make you god in a game that previously gave you loads of trouble. This and the other difficulty modes will highly encourage you to replay this game more than once, and rightfully so. It's amazing. Now delving into the story side of things, I should warn you that this video will contain spoilers for a 26-year-old PS1 game, so if you're interested in playing Resident Evil 1 but want the twist of the narrative to remain a secret, by all means, go do so now. With that out of the way, the game opens up with an alpha team of STARS, an elite private task force used for search and rescue operations. Alpha Team is on the search for Bravo Team, a separate batch of members whose helicopter went down mid-operation, and they find and locate said helicopter. But soon after they touch down, Alpha Team is immediately attacked by undead canines, with Joseph Frost losing his life. Brad Vickers, Alpha Team's pilot, leaves his team for dead, and the remaining survivors take shelter in a nearby mansion but quickly realize that they're split up. Eventually, it's just you, and your sole objective is to find your comrades and somehow find a way to escape this mansion. A simple premise that fits well with your simple objective. As you've definitely noticed by now, this game uses live-action cutscenes and does this for its intro and multiple endings. I, for one, adore these cutscenes. Sure, they're cringy and a little out of place, but I don't know, they have that fun B-movie charm that the game is clearly going for, and there's nothing like them. Going over to the actual characters, I really enjoy them, and they each have fun little quirks to set them apart from one another. Jill is a determined cop, but also backs that determination with skill and rationale. Chris is very courageous and brave, but doesn't think things through a lot, and is hinted at being a little bit of a hothead. Barry is the most lovable character here simply because as Jill, this guy is your wingman and comes in clutch at multiple points in the game, and he also has the most iconic lines out of any Resident Evil character. There's also Rebecca Chambers, who's the youngest and most inexperienced, but makes up for that with her level-headedness and perseverance. And finally there's Albert Wesker, the cool, calm, no-nonsense leader of the bunch. These characters elevate the story from simply being window dressing to actually being sort of engaging, and even though they're backed by bad dialogue and horrendous voice acting, You still somehow care for these characters because of their charming personalities, and you want them to escape. But what you actually see in RE1's narrative is like a quarter of the entire story. What truly makes Resident Evil stories so engaging are the files you will uncover that slowly explain the background lore of this place. You're just thrust into this creepy mansion of no explanation of what's going on, but the more files you read and uncover, the more you find out what really happened. Documents of unholy experimentation, corporation conspiracies, and a bad outbreak that ravaged the staff that worked here, transforming them into the very monsters you're fighting. This becomes a staple of the series to include such a fine level of world building in each title, and it's what really makes the stories in Resident Evil so intriguing to learn. Eventually, a very interesting subplot comes up where it's revealed there's a traitor looking somewhere in your team, and you don't know who it is until it's revealed that it's Wesker, your own captain. It turns out he's an asset of Umbrella who's meant to acquire combat data on the monsters present in the mansion by seeing how efficient they were against his own teammates. But now he plans on betraying Umbrella, taking the combat data for himself, and with it, the ultimate creation, Tyrant. A biologically engineered creature that's the accumulation of multiple Tyrant virus experiments, otherwise known as the T-Virus. The jerk is stopped by either Barry or the Tyrant itself, and Jill or Chris faces the creature. There are multiple endings to this game since throughout you can get your partners killed, changing how your game ends. I always personally save both of my teammates, and what follows is a climactic battle on the roof ending with a satisfying wrap on the Tyrant. After that, your team flies into the sunset happily ever after. At least for a month or two. And that was Resident Evil. And wow, what a game. It's not hard to see how this game blew up the way it did. Its survival horror gameplay is unlike anything anyone has ever seen before. Its immaculate presentation for 1996 only increased its horror atmosphere and made the game a beauty to experience. And the story is really engaging with loads of mystery, intrigue, world building, and fun characters. This game was simply the result of well-placed ambition that paid off beautifully in the end. That is why Resident Evil is as influential as it is and has earned its place as a cemented classic. But little did fans of this masterpiece know that this singular PlayStation 1 title was the start of something much bigger.